All right, welcome back. Welcome back. So, let's talk about improving relationship standards, which is what it's about. Once you enter a relationship, and we're talking about long-term relationships, not flings, right? Once you enter a relationship, especially if we're talking about a marriage, it's no longer about you. That's just a reality. Okay. Okay. Now, in some other contexts, depending on what angle we are entering the conversation from, it's always about you, because remember, if you lack self-value, everything will follow that direction. If you're readily available for any type of nonsense, low standards, low expectations, you'll be taken for granted. It's just how human beings operate. Okay, so they take you for granted essentially. So it's very important to note that. Okay, so it just depends on where you're coming from. But first tip, okay, first maybe about out of 10 tips I want to share with you is that you need to reflect on your values and your goals. We need to know what your values and your goals are before you start setting those standards. Okay, what are you made of? Where did you come from? Right? How were you socialized? Right? Now, your partner, how were they socialized too? You need to know this, right? You need to have taken the time to do some work around this, right? Because what people often mean when they talk about standard, anytime I've had conversations with people and they talk about standards, what they mean is that, well, I feel like I've lost myself. I feel like, okay, they're saying all these things that are emotionally based on the surface, right? But they haven't really done the work to see, like, okay, what standard did I have before? What standard am I going to? What is point A? What is point B? They haven't really taken the time, right? So it's like the same thing with a nation like Nigeria. Like, when Nigeria is trying to set new standards, but no, let's just take United States Constitution and slap it on ourselves, and suddenly things should be okay. But that's not how it's gonna work, right? Because they haven't done proper assessment to see how it fits into the culture of Nigerians. How are Nigerians made? What kind of trauma does Nigerians have? Who gave them the name Nigerian? When did Nigeria start? 5,000 years ago, or just less than 200 years ago? How old is Nigeria? How old ago is 1914, right? Right? So context, you need to take some time to really process what context is for you, for your own particular story. It's the same thing you will be doing if it was the beginning of a marriage, right? So just because it's the beginning of a marriage does not mean you were made on that day, right? There's probably a couple of months in dating, or a couple of years. You've probably dated a few people. You probably have some trauma, maybe some experiences, right? That you need to assess to see what your outlook is on relationships in general. We need to do the same assessment, right? So we can't just set standards. When you set standard, you need to have a baseline. You need to have some kind of benchmark, right, that you'll be comparing with, right? So when you say a car, even a car or books. So for example, when we were putting this book together, in terms of this shape right here, there's a standard that the market requires before they can allow you to list your product on the market. Not just that, even when you stretch it backwards like this, right? There is a particular standard in terms of the measurement, in terms of the dimensions, right? There is a standard. Where did I get the standard for? Not from myself. I don't get to determine I can, but it will cost me a little bit more to be able to put a custom type of standard out into the marketplace. Maybe you have an idea. I want my book to be placed like this and to be opening like this, right? Well, that's going to kind of kick against what the standards are. The standard is, when it comes to human beings, is determined by you. Your values are determined by you. But when it comes to market standards, market value, those are two different things. It's the same thing when it comes to dating, right? There's a standard in the marketplace. There is a market value. There is the value that you have from inside, which I need that as well. Because again, the market will treat you anyhow if you don't have a standard. If you don't stand for anything, you can fall for anything, basically, right? So it needs to be personalized at the end of the day. Number two, identify areas of improvement. You need to have taken the time to process the specific areas of improvement. Standard is overhead. That's the language you use overhead. But what specific areas, when it comes to you as a person, is where I come into the conversation. At the point of like, overall, yes, we should have standard. If you feel like you're at a lower standard, yes, you should start setting higher standard, right? Yes, you should. However, what is that process like? How can you accomplish what you're looking for in a more realistic way? When you set goals, you need to set SMART goals, which means it's specific, it's measurable. It's a little bit hard to measure emotional level type of goals, right? But measurable, just have that at the back of your mind. It needs to be achievable, okay? It needs to be realistic. I'm spelling SMART, SMART goals, right? It needs to be reachable. It needs to be time bound. Time bound, like when would you like to be able to say when I'm going to reach this point? At what point am I want to, like, what are my expectations? So I still want you to have expectations. The only thing I say about expectations is I want you to manage them. So if you don't even have a timeline around this, what are you doing, right? So number 3, of course, communicate your expectations, communicate your expectations, but dare I cancel that out. I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it because what I do here is quite different from what everybody else is doing, okay? If what everyone else is doing works for you, keep doing it, okay? If what everyone else is doing, please keep doing it. But I'm going to cancel that out. I'm going to call it manage your expectations. That's where your power is. Communicating your expectations can only go so far. It works 2 or 3 times. If you're having to repeat yourself, your actions are not matching what you're expecting. Your standard, your actual standard, does not match what your expectations are. Right? That's why Brother Patrick kept saying, you married your standard. You might not see it, but you married your standard. Okay? So the actual number 3 is not communicate your expectations, eventually it's about managing your expectations, especially when we're talking about you're already here as an adult. Your expectations might just be off. It might just be a function of dysfunctional situations from the past. We need to assess all of that. Okay, so it's deep. Okay, it's deeper even than this moment, because I need to hear your particular stories. So you shouldn't even take what I'm saying and go and cast it directly on your situation, because honestly, that person you're with might just have been a completely selfish person. And no. I need you to communicate and say, I will not take this, or else I will have to excuse myself honorably. Okay? Oftentimes you have to do that. Guess what? Oftentimes you're a selfish person and you shouldn't be talking about standards and expectation. You need to go back to work and worry about, build yourself up to the standard you're looking for. It could be any of the above or somewhere in between, right? So we need to be very, very careful with this whole thing called standard, boundaries, expectations. We need to be very, very, very careful about it, okay? Because it's very easy to generalize, especially when we're talking about extreme stories, okay? When we talk about people by themselves and all that kind of craziness, if that's what we're talking about, we need to be very, very careful with that. All right. So what would be number 4 in this case? What is number 4? Number 4 would be set SMART goals. Set SMART goals. What I really mean by that is realistic. Set SMART goals, not mutual goals. No mutual goals. Remember, the other person is not hearing you anyway. They have their own idea of standard. They want you to kneel down. Shout out to Auntie B. They want you to kneel down and serve them food. There's nothing wrong with that if you subscribe to it. Everything is wrong with it if you don't subscribe with it. If you're in disagreement, everything is wrong. No, it's not because you're wrong. The result you are creating is wrong, right? Because the other person disagrees. There's no unity for whatever reason, okay? You need to admit that first, acknowledge that first, and then we can now talk about how to solve that problem. You need to set SMART goals. That means specific, S for specific, M for measurable, A for attainable, some people say achievable, okay? And then R for, let me see here, R is for reachable. I think there's another version of it that I see sometimes. Let me find it. SMART goals, relevant. Okay, some people say reachable, but I think it's more relevant. Okay, relevant. That means context. Okay, Brother Bio, shout out to you, Brother Bio. Context matters, right? your own situation, like not the other person that you heard on a radio situation. Your own situation. It needs to be relevant to your situation, your culture, your social economy status, your religion, what you believe in. Guess what the other person believes in too, because you're already inside of one chance to some extent. Okay, but today is a new day. Okay, and the fact that you're becoming aware of all those things is actually a beautiful thing. It's not a negative. The fact that there's what we're talking about requires patience and process is a good thing. That means the result is going to be worthwhile, not just some cookie cutter nonsense that comes out of talking points, right? So set smart goals, relevant and time bound. The T stands for time bound. Okay, time bound. When it comes to romantic relationships, I will be very careful with that. Okay, if you would set time on your own personal growth, then sure, knock yourself out. But growth is is indefinite until we leave here, right? So I just want you to be, when it comes to the time bound part of it, don't put a time limit on yourself. Don't give yourself ultimatum. Okay, no, I need to give that person ultimatum. But usually what that means is you're giving yourself ultimatum. You need to understand that your situation is probably worth celebrating, but you can't see that right now because it's funky, right? Okay, so what is it about your relationship that you can celebrate today? Do an inventory of that. If you absolutely after 24 hours feel like there's nothing, then feel free to put a time bound on yourself. As in, like, not on that person. You should never put a time bound on that person. You can only influence them, not control them, right? You could say things like, well, I think I deserve better, right? In 3 months, if I don't see any change, I'm just gonna have to back out honorably and go sort everything else out, because there's something about me that's attracting the wrong situation. I can back out. See, it's still leaving, but the why behind the leaving is different, as opposed to I'm leaving because that person is evil. If that's how you're moving, you're giving them power still. They will control your life even when you're not in their lives. They will still be controlling your life. Is that really what you want? Let's go to number 5 really quickly. All of this is probably hard without education, right? Educating yourself, right? Educating yourself, particularly not just from knowledge standpoint, but application, right? How do you apply this to your own personal life? Like, everything I'm saying right now is not new to many of us. In terms of application, oh yeah, it's new. It's new. Educate yourself, seek help, seek support if you need support, right? If one of the subjects, this is easier said than done. It's not easy. It's going to be hard. Change is hard, right? There's going to be friction. There's going to be pushback, right? So if you don't have a good support system, either in the form of a group or in the form of accountability partners or in the form of a mentor, a coach, a counsel, a therapy, if you don't have that, this is almost impossible to do, especially if you have history. If you have another human being involved and they're kind of used to a certain way of things happening before, this is going to be very, very, very hard, but it's nothing new about that. When you're trying to grow, if you're seeking growth, it will be hard. It's just what it is, okay? Now, you can chew gum and walk at the same time. Sure. You can chew gum and walk at the same time, but a priority needs to be added to something, right? Prioritize self-improvement. Stop trying to improve other people. You can chew gum and walk at the same time, but if something has to take priority, it's self-improvement. It sounds kumbaya. It sounds like somebody is preaching to you. You've heard this before. If you're not getting excited every time you hear self-improvement, you probably need work. Okay, it's just a reality. Okay, it's just the reality. All right. Now, in terms of communication, let's get back to communication a little bit. I'm going to give you the 7th tip right now. Right. Remember, we think you should communicate, but we also know that verbal communication has its limits. Verbal communication is probably the least important form of communication you will have. Your body language speaks louder. Your actions speak louder. Right. Your actions, especially over a period of time, your consistency speaks louder than your words. If you take nonsense and your mouth says you don't take nonsense, you're a liar, and your results will basically tell on you, okay? Your results will tell on you. So practice healthy communication. What does that look like? It's active listening. 80% active listening, 10% express yourself, or 10% confirm, make sure you understand what is being said to you. That's your power. Your power is not in you talking. You're giving a lot of power away when you talk. You're giving lot of power, ammunitions to harm you away when you talk. You're talking, you're telling on yourself, okay? You should express yourself, but expressing yourself verbally particularly has its limitations, okay? So you should learn how to actively listen, right? Actively listen means you're listening to understand, not listening to respond. Okay, it's not the first time you're hearing that, so you need to practice it. You need to actually try it. You have to try it a few times, a few more times than 3 times. Okay, try listening 80% of the time and see if you don't get tested. If you don't get tested, you will get tested to talk, because somebody's going to trigger you to say something. They're going to feel like they're attacking you, and you feel the need to defend yourself. That is the test. That's the growth. That's the growth, right? Some people, don't get me wrong, some people need to be shut down, right? Because they're just useless in their way of talking. They're rude, right? But I'm just saying, that may be a means to an end, but that is not the end. At some point, you need to learn how to see where they're coming from, because clearly you're not going to leave. If you're going to be in their life, they're going to be in your life. You're going to have some kind of understanding at some point, okay? Number 8, hold each other accountable. I'm going to cancel that out, okay? I'm going to cancel that out for you, because I need to be referencing some things you've been hearing before and canceling them out and replacing it with something that will give you more power, okay? I don't want you to be giving your power away so easily, okay? I don't want you to give yourself away so easily. I don't like the idea of a lot of things you're hearing out there which makes you give yourself away so easily. People will harm you, not people of the streets. The people in your life will hurt you, not necessarily intentionally. This is their survival, okay? And sometimes for them to survive, they feel the need, right, to step over you, right? How you react to that is everything, okay? How you react to that is everything. So why am I saying how you react to that? Why can't we just hold them accountable? Because, bro, your power, let me be clear about this, your power is not in holding each other accountable. That means you'll be waiting for them to hold themselves accountable before you can hold yourself accountable. Instead, I want you to hold yourself accountable. At least lead with that, okay? At some point, you will be able to hold a person. You might need to hold a person accountable, but please don't attempt that until you've held yourself accountable, okay? If you don't hold yourself accountable, it's not going to work, okay? Hold yourself accountable. That's the priority. Hold yourself accountable, right? Start by saying, well, is it the way I'm talking? Let me listen to them and understand. But, well, at some point you're beating yourself up. You're right. But if you haven't assessed, if you held yourself accountable, how would you know? Lead with holding yourself accountable first before you worry about holding other people accountable. This is easier said than done. And because of that, I'm going to give you number 9 right now, because I can't say this enough. Okay, we're talking about setting higher standards, right? That's what we're talking about. What does it all have to do with setting higher standards? The point is that setting higher standard is higher for a reason. It cannot be that easy. Okay, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right? So it's not easy. It's a process. So at the very minimum, you go through these 10 steps and maybe 15 other steps more after this. But let me just give you these 10 steps for today, right? Number 5, be patient. But be persistent. Persistent with what? With yourself. Okay? With yourself. Because remember, we're going to leverage influence. Seduction. We're going to leverage influence. Not anything controlled indirectly or directly. Control does not work on human beings. Human beings cannot be controlled. Okay? They do what they want. It might seem like you're controlling them initially, because they want something from you. Inherently, they are selfish, okay? They want something from you if it seems like they are obeying you, okay? But influence is much more powerful. It's much more sustainable, okay? So be patient. Be persistent with your own skills, particularly with your own seduction skills. When I say seduction, I'm talking ethically speaking. I'm not talking about manipulating people or using some kind of gimmick from a lame who is a pickup artist on the internet. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about understanding the power of time, patience, process, and knowing for a fact that human beings have something that they care about. They have something that they care about. And if you haven't taken the time to understand what they care about, then of course nothing is going to work out for you because you're busy worrying about what you want, right? So be persistent with honing your own skills. Okay? Hone your own skills. Your own skills. Listen, this whole world is based off of attraction. Don't let anybody deceive you. This is all attraction. Nothing is happening outside of attraction, okay? Nothing is happening outside of attraction. Let me be clear. Let me say that a little bit louder so you can hear it. Nothing is happening outside of attraction, okay? Now, it might not necessarily be at an individual level. It might be because of 4th generation to 5th to 6th to 7th generation, but nothing is happening outside of attraction. Okay, last but not least, I think some of you are just too hard on yourself. Sometimes you're asking for higher standards because you haven't taken the time to really do inventory on your own life. You are ingrate. Okay, you are an ingrate. You're complaining about your life right now, and you haven't been in an emergency room in 5 years, but yet you're complaining about your situation right now. Okay, you don't know how to celebrate progress. Okay, you don't know how to celebrate progress. You don't know how to, when we say be grateful, we're talking about celebrating. Okay, we're talking about just celebrate. Like, listen, I'm better than yesterday. No, forget 20 years from now. Forget what it looks like on that other side. What is it about my life that I can be grateful about today? Celebrate progress. Little, small steps. Progress goes a long way when you celebrate it. No, forget that for a second. Just slow down. Just the mindset, right? Just the mindset that, you know what? I've improved. Oh, something improved about me since yesterday. You haven't taken the time to look at that. Why? Because you're like me, like the rest of us. We tend to see the negative faster than anything else. Right? We just tend to see it's just what it is. Right? So now we're talking about setting higher standards. Nothing about that is easier. Why? Because it's worth it. If you get to a place where your relationship has higher standards, right? We're talking about improving your relationship standard. It's worth all the effort you put into it. But we're extremely disrespectful, particularly to romantic relationships, right? We think it's just supposed to happen because once upon a time you were in love. Like you were just in love. And why, I didn't expect him to be like, oh, well, sorry, that was not realistic expectation. She or he was where they are all human beings, right? And they will fall apart. And the scriptures, any type of scriptures, any religion warned you about human beings. Human beings, okay? Now, yeah, especially the closest one to you, especially the one you're saying you never do it. You don't give your spouse grace, right? But that one that you live with, that you sleep on the same bunk, double bunk with, for that person, those are the people that will hurt you the most in life, not strangers, right? So how much more somebody who was raised by an entirely different family, right? Do you have unrealistic expectations? Well, don't answer me right now. Answer the person in the mirror. Go do the inventory over the past 5 to 10 years and see if you can boastfully say, you know what? I did. It's just not working out. There's a good chance that you didn't, okay? Just like the rest of us, okay? So those are the 10 things I wanted to share with you. You notice that I canceled some out and I replaced them, right? Because again, what you've been hearing all along has not worked. If it did, like, you don't tell me you're hearing anything new. You're not hearing it new. You're not hearing for the first time that you need to set higher standard. You knew that all along, right? But the idea of it's a process, the idea that there's going to be pushback, your expectations around those pushbacks were probably off. Okay? So those are the 10 tips for you. Did you like that? Did you find any value in that? Let me come into the chat for a second here. All right. That was not an exhausted list. That's just something to start with, just so you know that if you want higher standard, it's worth it. You should set higher standard. It's that people just don't wake up and say, I want higher standard. It's something is lacking. There's a void. That's a fact, right? But how they go about it, how they interpret that sometimes is off, Dee said, people thought I was capping and encouraging women to settle. Yes, I can understand. I didn't see your comment, honestly. But yeah, I can see how people see a blurry line, like settle or set higher standard. Listen, this should not be an argument if you had higher standard, because remember, nothing happens outside of attraction, right? This should not be a conversation. It's a conversation because clearly, maybe we're actually trying to tell you not to settle. Don't settle for less by thinking setting higher standard is snapping a finger. I don't think anybody thinks that, but the actions speak louder, right? I don't think anybody thinks that. I think setting higher standard needs to know what lower standard is. What is the frame of reference? What are you calling lower? What is the higher, right? What is the standard? When we say standard, when we're manufacturing vehicles, when we're manufacturing this microphone, there are standards. There's standards laid out by standard agencies. There are agencies that actually get paid for setting these standards. They just don't wake up and say, well, I need higher standard. Says who? No, we need to set standards for the marketplace. Wait, what? The market has standards already, right? Are you being unrealistic with how you're setting your standard, or you actually deserve more? Okay, you deserve more. Clap for yourself. I do think that it's a beautiful thing that you think you deserve more. Now, let's get to the work, right? To actually help you get to that level, because you are attracting what you're attracting for a specific reason, not necessarily your fault, but some reason, somewhere in your blind spot. Some reason you're attracting what you're attracting, right? But if you haven't ever taken the time to assess that, right? Like it's kind of weird to now point fingers then if you haven't taken the time to explain that. But Abio, good to see you, bro. I had to explain Taya that it was an observation and not advice or my line of reasoning. It's just I wish I saw your comments, sir. Not to self-improvement. Yeah, the priority. You can't give what you don't have, right? So standard, don't ask for standards if you haven't taken the time to assess, are you that standard, right? Are you the standard? Well, we're not saying you're not the standard. We're just saying outline that, be specific, smart goals. Like tell us exactly what you mean by standard, because I do think you should have whatever you call high standard. But to yourself, not to me, to yourself, make sure you've done the work to identify what that is and why, right? What is it that you want out of? Because your why may be off too. Maybe your why is purely selfish, and unfortunately there are other human beings involved. Sometimes they're your children, right? Selflessness has a place in this equation at some point. Because why? Because we are social beings, we are emotional beings, we connect with other people. We live life best when we connect with other people, right? What do I mean by best? Oh, well, based off of human standards, right? In your life, right? The more people you have around you that can come to your birthday, the more the standard of society is like this person, like people love this person, right? And we can't argue with that. We can argue with it, but it's a bad idea, Patience and persistence, those will be my words on intentionality this week. Yes, it's a process. It's a process. Be patient with yourself. When I'm asking you to bring patience into a conversation, it's actually for you, because you might be quitting way too soon. You might be giving yourself ultimatum unnecessarily. Those people that are looking good on the outside, they makeup on flick and everything. You don't know what they are carrying around. Okay, if you're going to compare yourself today to this day to the person yesterday. Don't compare yourself to people that you don't know what's going on inside. So when we talk about values, it's market value, but it's also personal values, right? Standards. We talk about what standard you set for yourself, what you like, what you would accept, right? And what everybody accept, or what they say they accept. You have no idea what's going on with them. They might accept nothing, but you don't know what it cost them to accept nothing. Accept nothing oftentimes means low tolerance. You don't know the cost they have to pay for having low tolerance. There's a blurry line between low tolerance and high standard, right? And you don't know what it costs them. Are you willing to pay the same price? Well, what do you mean price? I don't even know what I'm talking about. Exactly. Let's make sure we know what we're talking about. And the generic stuff are good, a good place to start from. But when it comes to application, we have to dig in a little bit deeper, right? What I said that triggered it, I only stated that fear rooted in age, the biological clock, lack of quality men, and societal expectations are reasons I see women lower their standards. Let me process that. Lack of quality men. I did hear when, was it you that commented when Brother Patrick pushed against the lack of quality men, right? That was you that made that comment, right? That was, because I didn't see the comment when he was responding to somebody, right? So fear rooted in age. There is fear rooted in age, all right? But there's also the reality of age, time, right? Which is nobody's mate, right? So that's another blurry line, right? Okay. Some people will push to the extremes of both. The extremes are the enemy. The extremes are your enemy. Okay. So either way, right? The biological clock, which is kind of like has to do. So people have fear of that. So they settle, is what you're saying. Lack of quality men. So the lack of quality men, 8 billion people in the world. That will be something I will always push against. I will have to ask you. Remember, accountability, self-accountability. Where have you been hanging out? Is my first question. Maybe I'm wrong, but we need to assess that. Where have you been hanging out that you are seeing low quality men? Have you been hanging out in the manosphere on the internet? Have you been hanging out with some fine men in real life? Do you know where to go, right? What about the people in your world, in your actual profession, right? Do you go to company events, industry events? Do you sometimes just get yourself out of your comfort zone, right? Because where you're hanging out is a reflection of your standard, right? How you see yourself is something you're relating with, something they're saying. So for example, for me, the manosphere, I listened to what they're saying. It came on my radar. I listened obsessively for a while, after a while, because standard, remember, I'm like, okay, this one's is lowering my IQ. Like, okay, let me give them some space. Let me go this direction, right? All of that, it needs to be considered before we can look at 8 billion people and say there's low quality men or women. Because they say the same thing. They say there's low quality in women. And anything that smells like gender war is always stupid. It doesn't work. And it's just useless talk for the most part, you know. So the quality men thing, let's put that aside. I think Brother Patrick already addressed that. Societal expectations is a real thing. Social intelligence. So social intelligence doesn't mean you just yield to people. It just means you're aware that there's certain standard in society, and so if you're going to push against it, you do it strategically, right? You don't just do it blindly. You just don't cover your face and say, I'm just going to do me. No, that's not going to work. You just collect. Okay. Human beings are not your mates. There's a lot of them. Okay. They create the market. The market is bigger than you, and the market is always right. But guess what? You can actually be smarter than the market. That's called social intelligence. That means you are aware first. You say, okay, I don't like that part, I like that part, but I'm aware. I'm coming from a place of intelligence when I decide I don't want to go a certain direction. As opposed to, no, let me just act like I'm just me in the world. I live in a cave. That's not reality. You live amongst people. That's where we get the social awkwardness. This giving off some kind of vibe. People, you can't tell, you don't know what it is. People don't even know. They can't even help you with it. But the result you're creating, you don't like it. So societal thing is a reality, right? Societal expectations are a reality. And I just think people are not even aware of it, you know? So these are the reasons why women set lower the, you know, I heard a lot. One of the things I wanted to talk to Anthony about was this idea that men have higher standard. Says who? I'm not understanding. The only thing I can take that as is generalization, which is okay. But, you know, a lot of men have low standards. That's what I'll be telling them. Like, stop setting yours. Why are you talking about a woman who wants you to spend by force? You must spend $1,500 on a date. That's a man who has low standard. A man who is engaging in that conversations has low standard. There's a ton of them everywhere. Okay, maybe they're younger generation, I don't know. But the idea that men are just walking around setting tones and they just want what they want, and no, I don't agree. A lot of men are lost inside of relationships that they shouldn't be in, at least temporarily. A lot of men are accepting nonsense they shouldn't be accepting because they never had standard. Because they never set some kind of expectations, not on the other person, themselves. The same thing goes for them. It's their reflection. You married her. That's you. That is you. Right? You don't want that anymore. Okay, let's sit down and talk about it without you pointing fingers, because that's you. There's something about you that aligns with what you have. Right? There are some exceptions. But most of the time, these are not exceptions because people have never taken the time to assess self. They point fingers at everything else but self. Very, very important thing to pay attention to here. She said I had to explain tire. It was an observation and not advice on my line. But lady, you go explain. No evidence. You need evidence now. Even myself. Yeah, at some point you end the show. Like me now, in about an hour, I end this show, right?
We go explain because no evidence.
Oh boy. Are you willing to pay the price? Yes. When somebody sets high standard, it comes with the cost. Have you taken the time to pay attention to that? Right? Are you willing to pay the cost of that high standard? Right? You want to be a multi-billionaire like Dangote. Are you willing to pay the cost? You think, Dangote just wake up every morning and just sit down there and put his feet up and just watch TV till 10 a.m. because he doesn't really have a Zoom meeting. He's making 6 figures. Zoom meeting at 12 p.m. and I can get up and then answer some of the calls. You think that's what Dangote do? Right? It's $20 billion in debt to the World Bank, your mate. Right? Do you have, 20 million gallons of tank hanging around on the beaches of Lagos where fire can just catch a whole fleet of them overnight? Are you willing to pay that cost? I mean, you like your peace of mind, jejely. Which one? Right? There's a cost, right? Dangote is high standard, right? In many respects, right? But do you know what we're talking about? Do you understand, right? Does that mean you shouldn't have high standard? No, I'm saying you should have high standard, but no, it is not as simple as taking somebody else's higher standard and casting it on yourself. You punish yourself because you don't know their story. You don't know what they have to pay for that. And I agree, it's a higher level of the conversation. The first level of the conversation, I agree, or the overall, let me say, overhead level of the conversation is that you should have standards, because if you don't have standard, people will treat you anyhow. They will, but for me, personally, they will treat you how you see yourself. That is undefeated. Okay. All right, we got about 4 more minutes to the top of the hour. Yes, MOP, it was me and the people in the comments misinterpreted you. Oh, I see. Low standard and high expectations. Yeah. Low standard. Yeah, all those things. I'm not sure what you're trying to say, but low standard can actually equals to high expectations. And high standard can actually equals to low expectations. It just depends on what we're talking about, right? But I think people were using expectation, standard, and boundaries synonymously, which is again another generalization, if you will. All right. But Patrick said, "Ma Binu, you are doing great." No. Listen, there's only so much you can get out in terms of what you are trying to say in text. So that's understandable. Yes. So let's do this. That was improving relationship standards. We just talked about 2-3% of what it is in reality. Okay, this is just a starting point. Okay, because if you are already inside of one chance, you are now in one chance, right? And it's going to take everything to step it up. Why? Because that's what you have to do in real life. In anything else, if you're trying to go to the next level at your job, you want to climb the ladder, you want to go to the next level, you don't expect it to be easy. You expect to have to deal with politics. You have to deal with all those people that are also applying for the same position, right? There's lonely at the top, there's smaller spots at the top, right? It's what it is, right? But does that mean you shouldn't go for it? No, you should go for it. But you have a better chance of getting there when you've actually done the assessment, when you've done the math, when you've, not trying to make it perfect, but just be aware that there's a cost to pay for that. Okay. All right. That was awesome. Let's see. Again, we have this thing we are promoting right now. AI plus digital marketing workshop plus book. You get a free book. It's one of my books. This book right here. Okay. You get this digital copy of this for free. It's a 200 and something pages book, full of value. All right, and it's a workshop, but we haven't set the date yet. But if you're interested in that, Just go to digitalmarketingcertified.com. 6-figure W2 salaries, 7-figure 1099 opportunities, $1,000 scholarships if you're coming through this group. Later on, that will disappear. Hands-on projects, of course, resume workshop, interview prep, unlimited mentorship, continuity plan. Okay, so you're not going to be left out in the woods by yourself. You can join the WhatsApp group at www.digitalmarketingcertified.com.